Vilhjalmur Stefansson was born in Canada, grew up in the United States, and during the Canadian Arctic expedition of 1913 to 1918, Stefansson was the commander of the expedition. That was a term that he chose for himself. He was the overall leader of the expedition.
But it was divided into two halves. A northern party under Stefansson, which was going to go dog sledding north of Banks Island, and a larger southern party, which would be under R.M. Anderson, who was his former partner from the Stefansson-Anderson expedition.
In my view, Stefansson was a remarkable person. He had wonderful ideas, a real visionary as far as the Arctic was concerned, both from the exploration part and the study of the Inuit people that were up there.
He sold the expedition on a number of grounds, one of which was that he could find the blonde Eskimo, and this was a very exciting concept at the time. The other idea was that he was going to find new land north of Alaska, a polar continent, which had long been speculated to be there.
Stefansson was always the promoter. He wanted to make a name for himself. He wanted to be known as an Arctic explorer and a scientist. But the amount of science that he actually did when he was traveling was not that much.
He was by nature an explorer. He was keen to travel and was always frustrated when he wasn't traveling. But the Southern Party quickly came to resent him.
As regards his treatment of some of the people that he was working with, he was a bit authoritative.
In fact, when they were leaving Esquimalt, Stefansson announced that they were not allowed to keep their own personal diaries, that he would control absolutely all publicity and all contact between the expedition and the outside world. So the scientists involved were not happy with him from the beginning.
What he didn't say, but what was behind it, was that he had contracts with several major newspapers around the world, in England and United States and Canada, for articles that he was going to get paid for himself. That was how he would be remunerated, in part.
Two things to describe Stefansson: it would be highly talented and opportunistic. A glory hound, but a highly talented glory hound.
The Arctic definitely has seasons, and the season that we least understand is the winter season. The men and women on the Canadian Arctic expedition, they had to know the Arctic winter very well because they were traveling always in wintertime. The farther north you go, the longer is the period of time in the winter when you do not see the sun. The sun does not come up above the horizon. And in some of the places where the Arctic expedition got to, there's 4 months where you don't see the sun. It's not 4 months of darkness. If it's a clear night and there's a full moon, you can see a lot and you can travel easily. But even on those long winter days at noon, although the sun doesn't come above the horizon, it comes pretty close. For a good part of the midday, it's like a long dawn fading into a long sunset. And the colors are fantastic, the pink and the blues. Everything's either pink or blue on those days when the sun is just below the horizon. And then those glorious days in like early February where you'll see the sun come up for the first time after a whole winter, the light is fantastic. The other aspect of the Canadian Arctic winter is the temperature. And of course, again, the farther north you go, the more extreme are the temperatures. The temperature can be an average temperature of -30 for 3 months. And so the cold temperature is very much a big part of your life. If you have the right clothing, you can survive. If you don't have the right clothing, you just can't.
Bob Bartlett was a famous sealing captain. He piloted ships in the Eastern Arctic and subarctic out of Newfoundland. He'd worked for Perry in his North Pole attempt. So he was a very well-known ice captain.
So he was a man who was very much used to ice, working a ship through the ice, and that's why he was chosen to work with the Canadian Arctic expedition.
But he was not experienced in the Western Arctic. Stefansson made a point of that afterwards when the Karluk was lost.
It was Bartlett's idea that if he sailed a little further north, he might get around a pack of ice. This was in August, I believe, which is pretty early for those kind of ice conditions. And he thought he could sail north around this pack of ice, and he could not, and they got stuck in the ice. Stefansson always blamed Bartlett for that decision, but it was probably a perfectly rational one at the time.
In any case, whatever decision was made, Karluk was not going anywhere that year. There was just too much ice. It was too thick along the Alaskan coast. Someone was going to have to go to the mainland of Russia and get back to Alaska to notify the authorities and to set a search party in motion.
William McKinley, who was on the Karluk, who survived the ordeal of the sinking of the Karluk, the only scientist that did survive of that group, and he had nothing but praise for Bartlett. He said he was a real hero, that he saved our lives.
Bartlett walked from Wrangel Island across very treacherous ice. It's a very dangerous place, down to the Siberian coast, then over to Bering Strait, and to Alaska, where they were picked up by a whaling ship and eventually went and got help. Otherwise, there would have been no survivors.
When you're isolated in the ice and the darkness of the Arctic and the ship's going down, you don't have time for everything. Curiously, they'd rescue a cat that they'd had on board. And McKinley told me, as long as we had the cat, we felt that we would be rescued.
But Bartlett is the hero of the situation. Bartlett's the guy who saves them.
And once that was accomplished, that was the end of his participation in the Canadian Arctic expedition. Vilhjalmur Jenness, the anthropologist for the Canadian Arctic expedition, he did so much stuff during the expedition that has given us the only look that we have at a group of people living in what was almost a Stone Age culture.
He was extremely lucky to study the Copper Inuit at a time when they had just been contacted by the outside world, and their life was just on the edge of changing forever.
There were two anthropologists hired by the expedition. Stefansson had hired a French anthropologist named Bouchat. The Karluk was caught in the ice. Stefansson decided he would take a little expedition ashore. One would think he would take Bouchat, who was the senior of the two men, but Bouchat wasn't feeling well that day, so he took my father.
Bouchat dies with the loss of the Karluk, and Vilhjalmur Jenness becomes the only real ethnologist working on the southern party, and he did fabulously good work.
The characteristics that he had were just what was needed to do this important study. He was curious. You have to be curious as a scientist to have the drive to find out the information. He was culturally sensitive. He loved working with these people. He wasn't above them, he was with them. He spent a lot of time with them, he interacted with them. He was an adopted son to a family.
He traveled for a whole summer with an Inuit family. They moved camp every other day. I mean, they're living hand to mouth, usually with no tent, just sleeping outdoors. He learned the language. He was an adaptable, brilliant guy.
Dad, in fact, and I'm proud of this, he contributed and they published 5 volumes of the 13 volumes that they published on the entire expedition.
He was really able to work with the people, be on the same level as them, and that allowed him to really capture so much about that culture that was basically unknown before the Arctic expedition arrived. These were used by the Copper Inuit as a bowl for serving soup, stew. It was usually a family communal bowl that would be handed around, and each person would take what they wanted out of it. But the fascinating thing about these is that they were fashioned from a male muskox horn that was like that thick in terms of horn and about that thick in terms of bone. And these were carved from what we call the boss of the male muskox, and the boss is where the horn fits on the top of the head. And as you can see, the bowl is very thin-walled, so it's light, it's very strong, and it's very functional. They used every square centimeter that they could to make the bowl as big as possible. When you get into your camp at night, especially if you're sleeping in a snow house or an igloo, it's really important that your boots be dried out and yet you still keep warm feet. So in the traditional Copper Inuit culture, the way you did that was by having a pair of sealskin slippers that you would put on your feet when you take your outer boots off. And you can see that the woman who made these slippers put a special little strip down here and cut little strips into the hide just to make an interesting pattern. In stitching together a pair of slippers like this, where we would use commercial brand of thread, the Inuit seamstresses would use sinew thread from the back muscle of caribou, mostly. On the underside of the slippers, there's a piece of ugruk seal sewed on to the lighter skin so that the heel piece and the toe piece had extra protection and extra strength so that the slippers would last for that many more years.
He was a quiet, serious, scholarly person. Dr. Anderson was the man to be leader of the Southern Party. He had a group of scientists working under them who all respected him.
They all had this great respect for him. Everybody called him the doctor. They didn't call him Rudolph or Mr. Anderson. They called him the doctor.
Anderson had been Stefansson's partner in the previous expedition, the Stephenson-Anderson expedition. It didn't end terribly well. There was a fair amount of bad feeling between the two of them. Anderson felt that Stefansson hogged all the limelight, which is true enough.
It was a really interesting expedition for both of them. They found out that they didn't get along quite so well as they thought they might have. And Anderson was a little hesitant about joining Stefansson again.
He did join the second expedition, the Canadian Arctic expedition. Presumably he saw it as a major career move. He worked by this point for the Geological Survey of Canada and had the whole rest of his career with the Canadian government. And this set him up well. I mean, this was the kind of thing that you could amass enough field work from something like this that you could spend the rest of your career studying it.
As an Arctic biologist, Dr. Anderson was obviously spending a lot of time collecting and preserving animals. And to do that, there's a specific set of tools that he needs. And this is one of Anderson's collecting kits, where he has all of the things he needs for skinning an animal, preserving it, and one of the most important things is recording the information on the label. So these little labels all have the National Museum name on them and Anderson's name as collector.
The Anderson part, the Southern Party, produced scholarly work of real merit, lots of publications, enormous collections of material. He was the one who oversaw that. He had the loyalty of the men who worked in the Southern Party.
Aside from all the wonderful stuff he did for Northern science, he did an awful lot for Northern people as well. He was able to relate to them on a special level and made sure that that information about their culture, about their dependency on wildlife was maintained and preserved for the future.
In the case of the Canadian Arctic expedition, they're traveling overland by sled, and they have lots of Inuit members of the expedition. They aren't just people the expedition hires temporarily, they're really members. They're with the expedition for a long time, they're well paid, they're respected, they're listened to. A lot of Inuit women were hired on the expedition to make clothes. You cannot live in the Arctic. You couldn't live in the Arctic then using European clothing. It wasn't good enough. You can't live in wool clothes when it's minus 40 for weeks on end. You need Inuit fur clothing, and the only people who could make it were Inuit women. So they hired lots of seamstresses. And this was part of the real genius of Stefansson. He's not just a showman. He did recognize Inuit culture for what it was worth. He didn't look down on it the way so many Europeans did. He was aware of what they had to teach him and what they had to teach the expedition in terms of living on the land, in terms of the animals that live on the land, in terms of how to travel. There was a certain amount of mutual self-respect that came out of this. Another important member of the expedition, a very important member of the Canadian Arctic expedition, was a man named Natusiak. He was Stefansson's guide and traveling companion and hunter with the Stephenson-Anderson expedition. He traveled with Stefansson when he first went to visit the Copper Inuit living around Coronation Gulf. And at the end of the expedition, as payoff, because he was making a good salary, and Stefansson wanted to save some of his cash, so he gave a lot of his supplies, leftover supplies, to Natusiak, including the boat, a boat called the North Star. Natusiak stays on Banks Island and takes up fox trapping. By Stefansson's account, and Stefansson isn't the kind of guy to throw praise around much at others for doing what he did himself quite well, he said that Natusiak was the best guide and traveling companion and hunter that he had ever met.
The war came along, the Southern Party just quietly finished up their work, but there was very little acclaim for the success of their operation. And the expedition more or less disappeared in the mist.
I think the main thing to realize is that that expedition captured a slice of time and history in Canada's history that is not all that well known.
The important part of the expedition, and one they can be proud of, I think, is the work of the Southern Party in mapping and collecting and coming back with all this collection material that they brought back.
Where, of course, the Northern Party found a couple of uninhabitable islands in the middle of nowhere that no one has ever been to since. And I'm not exaggerating by much.
It seemed like for Stefansson, the big thing was finding it. He took very few photographs. He brought back very few specimens. Every museum required that you collect specimens. That was the way science was done in those days.
Anderson came back with large collections that form the basis of many of the zoological collections at the Geological Survey of Canada and ultimately of the Canadian Museum of Nature.
The most important thing, looking back from 100 years perspective, is the connection with people and wildlife that was made by this intrepid band of men and women that has given us such a strong foundation for understanding our own Arctic territory here in the country of Canada.